Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. One of my favourite lines from Sandy Hickson's new modernisation of Macbeth, when the battle's lost and won. I am Richard Fittler, and my guest this afternoon is Sandy Hickson.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here.
Shakespeare is the great forefather of English literature, and Macbeth is arguably one of his greatest works. What drew you to the script?
In Macbeth, Shakespeare engages with perhaps the worst aspects of human nature, the human frailties that expose in us an egocentric lust for power, which is capable of driving one to the point of murder. What carries Macbeth into the modern moment is an audience's ease of connection with these themes, perhaps more than we can care to admit. The character of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are familiar to us, even familiar in us. This is what I enjoy about the play. And these characters, however monstrous their acts, are human, relatable, but fatally flawed. The play is not about human evil, but about human weakness and temptation. My manifestation of Macbeth has, as its backdrop, the political volatility of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement. This bloody movement is, of course, the stage for plenty of unchecked ambition and avarice that Shakespeare captured in Macbeth. Ultimately, the film displays the corrupting nature of power ill gained and the subsequent decay of the natural chain of being.
Yes, absolutely. It seems Shakespeare's Macbeth is applicable to, well, anywhere that holds human temptation. So, what inspired you to transpose his work into such a politically unstable region?
The motives of Shakespeare's Macbeth are everywhere in Sudan's bloodied power struggle, and in the dark superstition that plays a huge part in that conflict. We worked closely with Sudanese communities in developing the film, as well as, of course, the Sudanese actors. I wanted the film to reflect Sudanese culture and to tell a Sudanese story. One of the great pleasures I took in the development of the film was finding the human anxieties of Macbeth reflected in the bloody power struggles of this African nation, a place unimaginably foreign to Shakespeare's gloomy Scottish Highlands. In the bloodied Colosseum of war-torn Sudan, regicide, usurpation, and corruption are always in the foreground. When the battle's lost and won, focuses on the corruption of General Garange de Mabwa, who initially starts the Sudan People's Liberation Movement to fight for equality in his country. However, he becomes corrupted by prophecies of power, resorting to malevolent tactics such as the recruitment of child soldiers, which eventually led to his short-lived hour upon the stage. General Garange draws many obvious parallels to Macbeth, but my aspiration was not to retell either tyrant's story. Rather, I hoped that the intrinsic value of the play, the essential humanity which is prolific in all of Shakespeare's work, would resonate with the audience.
It seems amazing that Shakespeare could identify, with such precision, the natural temptations which would feed ambition. He was so successful at this that the moral and the themes of the script can be applied so precisely to real life situations, such as the Sudan's People's Liberation Movement. How do you think Shakespeare conveyed these moral themes?
Through Shakespeare's mise-en-scene and authorship, we see the battle between guilt and ambition foregrounded in our protagonist's vexing moral conscience. Macbeth's unbridled lust for power was first met with the hostility of his guilt in his soliloquy before committing the regicidal act. It is ironic that in trying to reassure himself of his actions, he finds it to be impossible to jump the life to come and to trammel up the consequences. He even foreshadows the coming to reality of his paranoid delusions in acknowledging that the bloody instructions return to plague the inventor. It is here that the audience is first exposed to the skirmish between guilt and power, which would prove to be Macbeth's hamartia. Shakespeare also used weather to emphasize a tone or mood in the setting of a scene. Often the rebellion of nature foreshadowed the destruction of political or moral order. It was from this that I drew inspiration to film the colossal storms encroaching on the African savannah. In my transposition, it rained for 7 days and nights after the king's death, something which is truly unheard of in Sudan.
As an audience, we grew to associate the brewing storms with the witch's supernatural powers. Even Shakespeare's script drew parallels between the two with the opening lines of, "Where shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?" However, suddenly, we see a great increase in the presence of supernatural powers after the death of King Duncan.
That's right. The Elizabethan era, in which Macbeth was written, was one of great superstition, where the natural and supernatural coexisted. The murder of King Duncan, the divine leader, was shown in Macbeth to disturb the natural chain of being. Shakespeare illustrated the natural disharmony with such lines as "The dark night strangles the travelling lamp." This describes the sun being encroached upon by the darkness, even though it was the middle of the day. This description of an eclipse also has great metaphorical relevance. During the time, the sun was often associated with the monarchy, and it was Macbeth succumbing to the darkness of temptation that Shakespeare wished to illustrate as eclipsing King Duncan's divine rule.
Now you've described your use of weather to foreshadow the supernatural. Could you please explain how you portrayed the witches, who had such a powerful role in Macbeth's manipulation?
I found cultural equivalents in these supernatural themes, allowing me to replace the witches with witch doctors while maintaining the integrity of the play. The witch doctors, I believe, play a crucial role in the unconscious, subversive forces flowing through the play. I found these mediators of the supernatural world to also be symbolic of the female rule which is hidden and most likely suppressed by the patriarchal order. It is, however, these instruments of darkness, along with Lady Macbeth's cloak of evil, that conspires against Macbeth, preying on his greedy ambition. Of course, Shakespeare leaves the victimization of Macbeth and the weight of blame between the three protagonists open to interpretation. It is in the audience's evaluation of the three witches' supernatural powers that they will allocate the blame. If the supernatural forces are given more credibility, then Macbeth becomes but a mere puppet of their prophecy. However, if the three black and midnight hags are only capable of observing the future, then Macbeth's blind ambition becomes more accountable. This is a delicious ambiguity which I tried to remain faithful to in my version.
What about Lady Macbeth? It seems that she plays a huge role in evoking of Macbeth's ambition and the subsequent killing of King Duncan.
Yes, Lady Macbeth seems to hold more ambition and greed than any other character. In her opening scene, she calls for the spirits that tend on moral thoughts to devoid her of her instinctual feminine care. Her ruthless ambition and manipulative nature surpasses that of Macbeth and challenges not only his masculinity, but the gender roles of the Elizabethan era. However, after King Duncan's death, we see her character battling a guilty conscience. She becomes a mere shadow of her former self, and eventually completely deranged. Her death leads Macbeth to ruminate on the nature of time and the morality of his actions in his final speech, "Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow." When adapting her role into a contemporary African setting, I found that her story perhaps held one of Macbeth's sternest warnings against blind ambition. Lady Macbeth's conversion from a malevolent manipulator of Macbeth to a suicidal, guilt-ridden queen depicts the greatest of consequences for the perversion of the natural moral order. While we see no binary option between good and evil in Shakespeare's play, it is clear that the script informs of a moral justice. Its numerous adaptations are a testament to its timeless relevance, thanks to Shakespeare's fundamental reckoning with the human condition.
I'm sorry, but that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
No, thank you. The pleasure was all mine.